Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Ty.
How are you?
Doing pretty well these days. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So here we are. We're entering into the holiday
Yeah.
season. We've finished a term. We're on a break. Y'all are about to go to Italy.
Yeah.
That's exciting. What else is on other than your trip? Like, what else is on your mind these days?
Gosh, I feel like there's a lot of things on my mind. I noticed that when we go on breaks and things sort of mellow out in the physical space, it gives our brains time to expand and think about some of the bigger picture questions.
Right.
So I think for a lot of us on the faculty and on the crew and the guides, we're doing big picture thinking right now, which is good.
Yeah.
But it doesn't help in my case. I just finished reading a book. It was a great book by an author named Paul Tough called The Years That Matter Most. And he does a lot of in depth interviews and analyzes lots and lots of data to look at college goingness and whether it's worth it,
Right.
and with which populations it actually helps with social mobility,
Right.
and which populations it harms, and who it's worth it for and who it's not worth it for. And so it's a big, complicated question, and a lot of people are talking about it right now.
Yeah. Sounds meaty.
Yeah.
Sounds like you could really do a deep dive on that.
Yeah, he did a great job with the book, so I was glad to have the chance to read it over the past week.
Okay. So in that context, like, how are you thinking and feeling about Wayfinding's place in that picture? What if you don't go to college? And how much of what else could you do?
Yeah.
What, how does that help frame how you're thinking about what's going on here?
Yeah, I think it reinforced, well, it did two things for me.
Okay.
One, it made my frustration and anger level high, because
Right.
for the same reasons that made my frustration and anger level high enough to start a different kind of college.
Right.
Because the system is just so broken, and there are so many people it leaves behind and actively actually harms by telling everybody the same narrative of, like, oh, college is the only path to success, everybody should do it. But there's a lot of nuance to that. Like, it really, really depends on which college you go to and whether you know what you're there for. And the colleges that everybody sort of aspires to are just perpetuating social inequities and making it worse.
Right.
So my frustration level, as I read each chapter, got higher and higher, and it sort of reinforced the reason why wayfinding exists. Because I think that the thing that we don't do well in our society with young adults is help them really think about what do they want to do with their life, what's the best path to get there, and supporting them in taking a multitude of different kinds of paths and being very intentional about it.
Right.
And so I think reading this helped me remember that there are a lot of different things that are going into that thinking for young adults when they're making these decisions. And I think the world is getting more complex and more scary. And so I think having a place like Wayfinding or other things like it to help young adults make informed, intentional choices is good.
Right. So in the sense of, like, if I don't go to college, the world is going to end, or
Yeah.
like I will miss out on something, you think that is not necessarily always an accurate portrayal, especially after reading this book and doing the work that you've done, that in some way, and I had never thought about that, in some ways going to college can be a choice that harms someone, that leaves them holding a ton of debt
Right.
and entering a workforce for reasons that aren't necessarily their own, and then they end up with a job that they could have gotten without going to college. Is that kind of the harm? Or
I think that's one part of the harm. The other part of the harm is that, especially if you're talking about people who come from low income backgrounds, if they're first generation students, if they're students of color, they often are following the same path as everybody else is told, but then when they get to a place, they are not supported, they're not welcomed, and they often end up dropping out. So they now have tried it, failed it according to society's
Right.
standards, when in reality probably it's the college failing them, taken on debt to be there. So now they have this sort of even more complicated story where they have debt, no degree, no completion, and they feel like they've failed in some way, when probably they haven't. It shouldn't be on their shoulders. But so I think that's probably the most harmful possible outcome,
Right.
right?
They don't
And-
even leave with anything. Like they have no degree. They
Right.
they just have a
Right.
negative experience, a lot of debt, and they feel like it's on their shoulders.
Right, like there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
When there's not something wrong with them, probably. It's the system that is wrong and not well set up to help them.
Okay, so what do we tell those folks? Like what other than like this isn't going to be the end of the world if you don't go the traditional college route?
Yeah.
Like what else can they do? What else should we be telling them that they can do?
I mean, I feel like there's all kinds of things that young adults could do. I think the best advice we could probably give is pause
Yeah.
and think about it. So rather than going straight from high school to college, go do something else first. It could be work, it could take a break, you could travel, you could do a gap year, you could volunteer with the AmeriCorps or City Year, or there's a program called Year Up, which is really cool. So finding something like that to pause and reflect and really ground yourself in, because the world right now is just, when I started wayfinding in 2015, the political landscape in the United States was very different. The cultural landscape was very different. The types of conversations we were having had a much more optimistic tone to them. So being a young person now, so in just the last 4 years, almost 5 years now, things have gotten a lot scarier. So back in 2015, when we wrote our creed, we said, one of our lines of our creed is, "The future is uncertain, that's good." And now I still believe that, and it is harder to believe that now than it was then.
Right.
But I think there's a lot, what is happening is there's a lot of shakeup, and a lot of things are changing, and a lot of things are in conversation and being questioned that were not being questioned before.
Right.
And we don't know where that's all going to land. And so one of the things that's becoming more and more clear from economists and sociologists and otherwise is that college is not the panacea for like getting everybody into like middle class or whatever they're trying to get into, or getting a job even.
Right.
So I think pausing and grounding yourself and really thinking about, who am I and what do I want to do and what's the path to do that, and interviewing people and talking to people and getting outside of whatever bubble you have been in, whatever that looks like for you, which is very different for everybody. Which it could be a thing like a wayfinding thing if that is appealing, but it could be a gap year program or service or working or apprenticing or whatever.
Awesome. Well, yeah, hopefully this holiday season, as people are having those conversations with their families and maybe feeling pressures from outside forces, they can hear you and feel empowered and optimistic that it's not the end of the world. In fact, it may be a really good decision for you to not go right into something that everyone else is telling you should, and think about what you really want, experience the world a little bit, and then make decisions from that point.
Yeah. And I'd say I imagine it is hard for parents as well, and the family members who are the support system for these young adults, because you love them and you want the best for them. And for so long, our societal message has been, well, go to college, go to college, go to college. But there's lots of different kinds of college also. So just doing something with an information and intention behind it is better than doing something that might cause harm or get you down a path that now causes all these ramifications that were unintentional.
Yeah.
So I understand how hard it might be for parents, and I also talk to so many parents who just love their kids and want the best for them and want them to be happy. And we'll support whatever that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Have a great trip in Italy.
Yeah, thank you.
Hope the holidays are good for you and for everybody out there.
It's going to be great. Yeah. Wayfinders in Italy.
Yeah, good times.
It's going to be good times.
Yeah, right on. Well, have a good one.
Thank you, Ty. Okay. You too. Yeah.